Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the football experience, where we bring all of the joy. Caleb, I told you earlier, I've started cultivating some strawberries. So from the seed. So hopefully that's a little spring/summer project for me. So for all the viewers, I'll maybe if you follow us on Twitter. I'll put some photos up on Twitter.
Yeah.
Maybe like once it starts sprouting, like a little bit, then then that'll be like the first update and so on. And you know what I actually did? So I bought some strawberries, right? And I took a bite out of one. I was like, all right, I'm gonna whatever one's like a really nice one, a really sweet one. That's the one I'm gonna plant. And then the first one I took a bite out of, I was like, yeah, this one's getting planted. So yeah, that one was used as I guess the project Zero or whatever, Patient Zero, Patient Zero. Yeah,
nice.
Yeah. So
And also, if you're gonna do that next time you make those potatoes, put up some pictures of that
ooh,
for everyone.
yeah, I should do
It's
that.
cooking corner.
I may
Bring it to life.
maybe I should do like a cooking playlist. I did, dude. I make sick mashed potatoes, like sick mashed
Talk
potatoes.
it up. All these potato things.
You know what I do? So like when I cook the chicken in the pan, like obviously the chicken season and everything, I have like one of those lids that go on the pan, and then when I take the chicken like off the heat, I put the lid on top and then like just let it rest, right? And then obviously that like cooks the chicken, continues cooking the chicken internally, but it also like lets the chicken rest at the same time, and it lets out some of the juices, right? And obviously, like those juices get mixed in with all the spices and things that you used. Yeah,
gravy for the mash.
exactly. And then I chuck once I mash all the potato up, I chuck all the mash inside of the pan, and then I just integrate it into and oh my god, it is beautiful. Like it is next level. And the initial mash itself, you know how some people put like cream cheese or milk and so I used to go butter and milk. Now I just put like a little bit of butter in and that's it. Like I don't go anything else. And that's it. Just
Pure
a little bit of
mash.
butter, just a little bit of butter in the mash. The least amount of process. I know butter's pretty processed, but like I'm not using the whole 250 gram knob of butter or whatever.
You're not? Oh, damn.
Nah,
I like
nah.
mine when you use the whole stick.
I like my butter.
Like my butter.
Just eat the butter raw off the stick.
Oh, I might. Butter's so good.
But yeah, like that's how I make my mash, and it comes out perfect like every time, and I'm quite happy with the results.
Look, yeah, I think you need to open up like a side street stand and let the people decide. It's easy to say that on a podcast because no one's going to be able to test it. But I think we need some proof.
Mate, I tell you right now, like, so Tiff loves it, so that's already one person that loves it. But then it might just be her enjoying the fact that she's getting a free feed. So, so maybe it's I don't know. I'll assume that she loves it.
Yeah, just go with that.
Yeah. But yeah, look, that's I guess that wraps up Nev's cooking corner. Maybe a
Potato based again.
Yeah, potato based again. But yeah, maybe we bring it back next week, a weekly little segment. You know what we need to do? You know how like on radio stations and stuff like that, they have like those intro songs for like segments. We need to start doing that. Like I'm obviously not a sound guy or anything like that, and like so I can't make this stuff up. Like I don't know if anyone wants to make an intro, like a little theme song to bring us into segments or into the show. Send it in.
Yeah, we do. That is a common theme of most pods. We do need some intro and outro music.
Yeah, it would go down well. But Caleb, is there anything new in your world?
Not really. Just football. Yeah, I made some mash last night. I put ingredients in mine like
what goes in your mash?
Bit of peas at the end. To be fair, I don't make the mash. It's the microwave stuff. But it's still good. You put the fried ham and onion, and then you put
Ooh,
the peas in there. You put extra butter, obviously. If you were cooking meat, you put a bit of that meat gravy in there. What else? Bit of cheese. So it's a loaded mash, kind of like
loaded
loaded
mash. That
fries,
actually
but with
sounds alright.
mash. Yeah, I love peas in my mash. That's a staple.
I'm
I
not the
don't know if I
biggest
said
fan
that.
of peas.
Oh, I love peas.
I love peas.
I'm good with that. Yeah. Simpsons episode. But how do you get peas? With a
With a
knife.
knife. This is probably the worst way to get peas. Just use a spoon. Looking back at that scene as an adult, like it makes no sense. But as a kid,
No, mate.
you're like, yeah,
No, but I love it because like
yeah,
the
like
the
yes, it
guy
makes
he's with,
sense.
yeah, it's so good. He just thinks he's spinning all this prophecy. It's like, of course, with a knife. Enough of this being nice to everyone.
Caleb, you know what? Let's get into the actual show. And you know what? We'll kick it off with El Clasico. And I don't know if you want to take it off the bat, or if you want to let me give my thoughts. I don't know. Like I don't
Yeah,
have.
go on, give your thoughts and then we'll
Well, look, I'll start off by saying that I do believe that over the course of the 90 minutes, I reckon Barcelona was the deserved winner, but it wasn't like heavily one-sided. Like for instance, last year's Clasico where they won 4-0. But it was.
just shock.
I think it was. I think it was. It's one of those results where like either a draw or a win for Barcelona would have been a fair result, but a win for Real, I don't think would have been a fair result.
I thought a draw was fair. I thought Barcelona winning was unfair. Although Barca were pretty good
For
in
the
the
first
start of the
45, though,
second half.
yeah. Even for the
I
start of the
thought,
first half, they were pretty good. They were, like for the first 15, 20 minutes, they were like bombarding. It seemed.
yeah, the home crowd advantage really spurred them on there as well. But the start of the second half, they were utterly dominant, and Real Madrid were quite poor. I thought Real Madrid were decent at the start of the game because they knew what to expect, but maybe if I could level a criticism, Real Madrid, they were a little bit passive in that first half. I thought maybe they could have taken the game to Barca maybe a bit more. And I think the goal that they concede comes from them being passive because I thought they were defending well until that point. But if you are going to defend deeper, you're obviously always opening yourself up that a cross deflects to the wrong place or a shot deflects to the wrong place. And that's exactly what happens for this because they're defending their own box. They're defending well for most of the half. They're maybe a little desperate, but you kind of have to be when you go to the new camp and you're playing against the league leaders in Barcelona with that atmosphere as well, which was fantastic. But yeah, if I could level that criticism, and obviously conceding with pretty much the last kick before half time is an absolute killer in a game you know you must win in a game behind enemy lines as well, I guess. So look, I really wanted Real to win it. I guess I was hoping it into existence with our predictions pre-pod. I don't think they did enough to deserve to win it, although it'd be remiss for us to not mention the fact again, whether you want to call it luck or not, Barcelona still get a massive VAR decision in the last 10 minutes of the game, which he was offside, but in the olden days, no one's going to complain about that if that's given. So VAR gets it down to the shirt sleeve. And yeah, they dodge a bullet again because Barcelona have been dodging bullets all season. And I guess we'll do the main takeaway later. But yeah, in terms of the game, I don't think you're unjustified in what you say because I think maybe Barcelona's good moments were more eye-catching in the game. So like you notice them more. But I thought overall the game was probably a 1-1 considering it was at the new camp for me. Yeah, I thought 1-1 was deserved. And it goes into the whole thing of I just don't think Barcelona are this much better than Real Madrid. Now, they might be deserved winners of La Liga, and let's make no mistakes of it. We've got another league that is done now. I
Yeah,
don't
pretty
think there's
much.
any coming back from this. 12 points, no games against each other. We put this one in the books with Serie A. Interestingly enough, maybe Ligue isn't quite completely done. And if you look at PSG, you'll know why. And the Bundesliga is the best race out there. I think the Premier League is the most interesting race, but the Bundesliga, in terms of how close it is and what's been happening, I think is the tightest one. But yeah, this is another league in the books. I don't think Barcelona have been good enough to wrap it up at this point of the season, but alas, here we are. But they haven't been bad. I'm not criticizing Barcelona. I just don't think they're that much better than Real Madrid. And I thought this game kind of showed it. I thought it's symptomatic of, or a snapshot of, what we've seen all season. Barcelona ride their luck a little bit at times, and this time they actually pop up with a winner. And yeah, they've been doing that all season. They didn't. I don't know. My problem with Barcelona in this game, they didn't look that threatening. Rafinha was pretty good. Lewandowski's been off the boil for ages. No Pedri, so no creator. I thought it was a lot of like when they had their good moments, it was pretty much all because the home crowd was pushing them on, and that's fine. That's your advantage by playing it at the new camp. But yeah. To your point, I think 1-1 was definitely a fair result for this game.
But even so, like the way that Real got their goal, like it was pretty fortunate.
Hugely lucky.
Yeah. So,
what did you think of the Xavi's decision to put Araujo as the right back? And also, we got it wrong when I didn't check how many games there was in between, but I was quite surprised to find out he'd already served his whole suspension from getting sent off against Valencia.
They might have counted like similar to in England where they count FA
that El
Cup.
Clasico Cup game
maybe
come in that time. It probably
it did.
In fact, I'll check it while you speak.
It probably did, but
yeah.
But in terms of like playing Araujo out to match Vinny, isn't it similar to what he tried to do with Rashford as well? When they faced United.
Yeah, and then Rashford never played on the left-hand side.
Yeah, so
no, it was only one game. So it was only the Bilbao game.
Okay.
Because the Real Barca game was before Barca Valencia. So that's a weird one because it was a straight red, I'm pretty sure.
Maybe they appealed it then.
Yeah. Well, this is the second time Barcelona have done this to me, because I remember when Mati went over to Spain to watch Barcelona Espanyol, I remember saying to him, it's unfortunate because you're not going to get to see Robert Lewandowski because he got himself sent off just before the World Cup and this game was just after. And remember they did that whole appeal thing and he got to play for like the next 2 games? It's just weird. Like Barcelona keep doing this to me. I'm like, they're going to be without this guy. And then I look at the team sheet. Ronald Araujo's playing? Like, how's that happening?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I found that weird as well. I'm like, wait, when I saw it, I'm like, didn't Caleb say that he's suspended or something? I'm like, okay, whatever.
I was sure. I've got to look into the bylaws more, the rules and regulations.
Can you read Spanish?
Sure.
Spanish and law as well, like on top of not is it only Spanish, it's Spanish law.
No, that's too much for me.
Good luck with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, with the decision, look, if Xavi believed that Araujo is the one to lock down, if he has more faith in him locking down Vinny, who is obviously Real's most dangerous player, then I guess it's the coach's decision. But I don't know. Like I would have kept Koundé there. It's not exactly like Koundé is like one of those like slow sort of right backs, like a Gary Neville, for instance, where like if he gets beaten, like if a player puts it past him, like he's never winning a foot race. So look, if he thought that it was a better matchup, fair enough. I'm nothing. I'm nothing against it.
They won the game, and I must say, when I saw it, I had something against it. I'm like, for me, Araujo's the centre back, and Koundé's the right back. If that, I think they're both. I think an ideal centre back partnership for me for Barcelona is both of them playing together in the centre back. But yeah, I thought, but maybe he looks at it that Araujo is the guy he wants to put on an opponent, which made the United performance at home even more baffling after he saw Rashford wasn't playing on the left and didn't move Araujo back into the middle. But maybe Araujo's the guy, yeah, like you say, he puts on to lock down the probably the physical threat of the opposition, because you can't say Vinny is necessarily always the main threat, although this season, probably because of Benzema's injuries, he is. But you've got to look at Karim Benzema and think, well, that guy's got to be a threat as well. So maybe he trusted the mobility of Koundé against Benzema, and as well, maybe the familiarity, given that they've been in well, they would have been in French teams for a couple of years before this together. They've played together, so that he knows maybe a bit more Koundé about Benzema's game and the mobility, and Araujo is more for the physical threat of Vinny. And I'd say he did well. I wasn't outstanded by what he did because I thought Vinny had a pretty poor night, and I thought Vinny could have done better. And again, I'll go back to saying he is the main part of, well, him and Camavinga makes a good run for the goal as well. And I thought we didn't see that enough. I thought, given that what you always say about Modric being able to play all three of those roles, I thought maybe Modric or Kroos maybe could have held the midfield and they could have used the physicality of Camavinga to run past Busquets more. I thought they played into Busquets' hand, and the one occasion that they did it in the first half where Camavinga makes a forward run, they get a goal from it. I know it was very fortunate. I cannot believe that goal went in. Like, the spin of the ball is taking it away. There's only, like, it has to go in that precise spot for it to go in, and it just perfectly.
It was
just
a striker's finish.
I know, what's just happened? What a glancing header. But yeah, I thought Vinny could have had a better night. I thought Benzema probably could have had a little bit of a better night. And they'll be pretty disappointed to concede on half time and then to have their own goal chalked off and then concede right at the end of the game. So yeah, but this one puts the title in the book. Oh, another tactical thing. With Barcelona, I guess I'll give them credit, but I'll also give them a bit of criticism at the same time, because I didn't particularly like what Xavi did, but I guess it worked to a point in this game. The thing that I always observe with Barcelona this season is I always like their shape. I always like their tactical setup, but I don't necessarily always like the personnel he plays in positions. And I think that's been a running theme with Xavi. And on this occasion, it worked. But one thing I really liked was De Jong and Busquets as sort of the double pivot, but De Jong understood the characteristics of Balde as the left back and let him push up more often. But this wasn't the 3-4-3 with the box that we've seen when Pedri's available. This was, for me, more of a 4-3-3, but with very specific rotations in the wide areas. So, for example, on the right, if Araujo's playing a right back, the characteristics of Araujo, you don't really want him overlapping. Maybe if there's dead ball situations, you want him pushing up because he can be an aerial threat and you can play past any Real Madrid press. But apart from that, you'd want him more with the balance of a third centre-back. Whereas Balde is, for me, a left winger who can defend a little bit, but he's not great at it. So De Jong understood that, and he's like, all right, well, De Jong and Xavi, and it's like, well, let's push Balde right up the pitch. I guess Gavi was playing, what was the midfield? Gavi was playing, who was playing on the right? No, Gavi might have been playing, the left.
Gavi
was playing. So,
yeah,
obviously allow Gavi to come inside. And then Balde can push up, and De Jong sort of playing as one of the world's most technical left backs in that moment, which I don't mind to see, because I honestly don't love De Jong as the box-to-box midfielder. He's pretty good at it, but I so much prefer to see him as a tempo dictator. And I guess when you've got Busquets in the side, he can't do it through the middle. So he drifts and he finds space into the left, and Barcelona are able to control big parts of that first half and definitely the start of the second half by applying pressure that way, because you've got a player who's drifting into that role, looking for the forward passes, who can find the forward passes. So as Real Madrid, you've always got to be wary of that. So I thought Barcelona have played a pretty good tactical game all season. I don't always love the personnel, but I mean, that's the annoying thing for me. I don't always love it, but they're 12 points clear and they've wrapped up La Liga. But I mean, at the same time, if you want to point to European performances, how good are Barcelona really? Your answer is somewhere in the middle, because in Europe they've been woeful.
Yeah, I think I still stand by my point that Xavi, even though like La Liga is wrapped up, Xavi still should have taken this season and tried to pretty much do what Arsenal are doing and rejuvenate that squad, but instead they signed. I guess they signed like a mixture of youth and experienced players. Like they signed Christensen. They signed Lewandowski. Who was the other Chelsea centre back that they signed?
Marcos Alonso. Well,
Alonso.
not centre back, but Marcos
Yeah.
Alonso.
But like,
so he is a centre back for Barcelona.
Yeah, but now he is. That's why like I'm thinking of that. So like, they sort of semi rejuvenated because like Koundé's still young, Araujo's young as well, Rafinha's young, Gavi and Pedri are obviously there. They came through the youth system, so it doesn't exactly seem like they have a clear signing policy, if you get me. It seems a little bit of the old policy and a little bit of a new policy. It's very weird to explain if you sort of get where I'm coming from.
Yeah, and I think in that point that you make, I think that's where we need to also give Xavi a lot of credit as well, because he's been able to manage that.
Yeah.
He's been able to, not necessarily always by conventional wisdom, and a lot of team sheets, like I say, I look at it and I'm like, Marcos Alonso is centre back. I'm not thrilled by that, but it has worked for La Liga purposes. And I know at the start of the season, I thought this was a squad that was ready to compete definitely for La Liga and go. If things went right for them, go deep in the Champions League. Obviously, things did not go right for them because while I say they were woeful in Europe, they also got drawn a group that had Inter and Bayern, which is easily the hardest group anyone had to navigate. And then obviously get Manchester United in the playoffs of the Europa League. So you can give them somewhat a pass, but they are the big test that they're going to have to do better at in the future. And some of the signings were weird. Marcos Alonso for sure. Christensen has been pretty good, I must say, this season. He's sort of been the rock of the defence, given that Araujo missed all that time with injury pre-World Cup. So in terms of the defence, it's obviously we know Ter Stegen's been that good, but I guess the regen point, if you look at left back, Xavi's definitely done that. He hasn't relied on Jordi Alba this season. I think Balde's made himself first choice. And I think looking forward, it's the forward positions for me that need something, because Lewandowski, you'd say he's had a good season. If he doesn't score many more goals from now to the end of the season, maybe that becomes a more pressing issue in the summer, because maybe you think, all right, this guy's frazzled. Maybe it's just the post-World Cup hangover and he'll be back. How much longer can we expect Robert Lewandowski to keep scoring at a great clip? He's already gone off the boil from what his normal clip is, and that's probably the new club and stuff, but I don't think he's a 40-goal a season guy anymore. And if he's not that, then you're going to have to either look for supplementary pieces, or if you think it's a pressing enough issue, you might have to look for another main guy up front who's going to get you your goals. So, yeah, and for no doubt, Barcelona's identity is somewhat shaped into this solid, maybe not defensive, but, controlling, strangling, this defensive unit sort of thing. So I'm interested to see, A, the transfer policy, to your point, but B, what Xavi's mentality is going forward after. Is he going to double down, and is he going to make himself a slightly prettier Atletico Madrid in the future? Or are they going to try and get back to that Barcelona way and try to be more entertaining next season? And if they want to do that, they're going to need more quality in the forward areas, because even in this game, there was no creative spark. And that's obviously because Pedri's not in the team. But Pedri by himself doesn't get the kind of numbers I think they need someone who's going to get. He might be evolving into that player, but I think they need another supplementary piece or another main piece if they think Lewandowski's not the guy going forward, which is harsh because he was exceptional pre-World Cup and a big reason why they got all those points then. But yeah, I'm very interested to see, A, the signings, but B, the mentality. What's Xavi's mentality going forward? Is it, double down on this, or is it change it?
Well, I still hold my prediction that, or at least my assessment, that Xavi is essentially building from the back. So he's making sure that they're not conceding goals, and then they can build. They can build the back line, they can build the midfield, and then focus on the attack later. Because you only need to win games by scoring 1 goal. It's enough to win a game, as long as you're not conceding any. And it's pretty much
Not going to work forever though.
But it's what Pep did at City. It's what Arteta did at Arsenal as well. It's what Klopp, to an extent, did at Liverpool. So he sort of, would you say Klopp sort of built from the front?
That was my assertion all last season when Liverpool were relevant. Like, you look at this team, it's flipped. This team is reversed.
But yeah, like it just seemed like it was what I said at the start of the season. Like Barcelona signed like some players for the future and to build upon, and then they signed some ready-made stars. Well, star, you wouldn't really say Christensen and Alonso as stars, but but you get my point. Like they signed. Well,
the guy who got the winner in this game was, I'd say he was a bit of a star.
Yeah, but they signed a mixture of ready-made players and prospects. Whereas, so it was a weird sort of transfer policy. Maybe next season or this transfer window coming up, maybe they sign more towards a prospect type of transfer policy. Considering they need to start looking at rejuvenating that team, because Lewandowski's he's going to probably play another 2-3 years. They're going to lose Alonso and eventually they're going to lose Alonso and Christensen as well. So that, and Busquets as well, Jordi Alba. So they're going to need to start rejuvenating that squad. So maybe it will be a slightly different transfer policy. However, having said that, apparently there's rumors that Messi might be coming back, because I was reading something that like apparently Messi didn't get along with Piqué, and he sort of blames Piqué for like a lot of internal crap that went on in the club, because as we know, Piqué is almost like a half politician, and Messi even came to Barcelona to celebrate Xavi's birthday with Busquets and Jordi Alba and some of those players and stuff like that. So isn't Messi out of contract as well at PSG at the end of the season? It was only a 2-year contract, wasn't it? So
there was talk of him signing an extension. I don't know if he actually went through with it.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, I haven't seen the PSG match. I don't know if you watched it and stuff, but like I saw some report that apparently like Messi after the game or something, like he stormed off from the team and like cracked the shits like down the tunnels and stuff like that after the PSG game. So
we'll touch on a little touch on PSG.
Yeah, we can touch. You can touch on that, but like, look, you might have Messi returning back to Barcelona. Like, it's not going to be the Messi that scores 40, 50, 60 goals in a season, but it'll be interesting to see how he fits into this new Barcelona then.
Man, for Xavi's sake, I hope it doesn't happen. That gives them a footballing dilemma. I don't think they can be as solid defensively if they've got a passenger.
Yeah.
Like a not peak Messi. Like Messi can't be a passenger, and we saw it with PSG. He can't be a passenger anymore. He's got to do things, and rightly so, he doesn't want to do things against the ball, unlike Kylian Mbappe, who we can have more gripes with why he doesn't work against the ball given his age. But given the fact that this guy's already the greatest of all time, if he doesn't want to work against the ball, fine. But if you don't want to do that, you can't play at this level anymore. I'm sorry, because your attacking influence doesn't outweigh the fact that you don't run against the ball. So, that will give Xavi another identity crisis at Barcelona, and one that he's going to have to figure out. And if they get Messi back, and Messi is going to be a big part of this team, then they're going to have to almost start from scratch again and develop a new identity next season. Now, I guess we didn't really expect this to be Barcelona's identity going into this season, so maybe there's a chance that they can do something like that and regenerate an identity, but I don't know. That's in the future. That's kind of in the clouds, thinking the Messi reunion. It might happen because football's strange like that, but I don't know. I think from the footballing aspect, for Xavi's sake, I get your point in terms of he's still getting his numbers. He's still a creator, and he can be a supplementary piece. But the fact that he's a supplementary piece and doesn't work defensively, that's a killer for me. You've got to be the main man. You've got to be scoring 50 goals a season if you want to not run against the ball for me.
Well,
And yeah,
like, where would he play though? Because because apparently, on the report that I read, Xavi would love to play him like as an inside right forward. So that pretty much means that you need to have an overlapping right back. So pretty much like a David Alves, Danny Alves, David Alves. So you pretty much need someone like running up and down that entire wing, because you're gonna have a wide left winger on the other side, I assume, to sort of offset that lack of width that you're gonna find at times by having Messi playing not so wide, and he's starting out as like, I guess, an inside right forward, and then maybe like what you have Lewandowski playing centre forward, Gavi, Pedri in behind with De Jong or Busquets sitting.
I feel like it will be. I don't think. Well, if we're talking about next season, I think it's time to get Busquets out of there. I think it'll be some sort of asymmetrical formation, and it will probably push either Pedri or Gavi out of their favourite position. I just don't think it's worth doing that for Messi at this stage. I want Pedri or Gavi to keep developing given their age, and yeah, well, because I don't think they have that kind of right back. Is why I think it'll be asymmetrical. I think it'd be a Rafinha or Dembele playing touchline wide outside of Messi, which could be fine. And then the balance will be more of a back three behind it with Koundé, Araujo, and Christensen. And then you'd probably have De Jong just sweeping in front of that. You'd have Balde running up and down the opposite line. And then I guess Gavi and Pedri rotating sort of those central midfield / inside left positions on the other side. And I don't know, maybe that could work. Maybe that's more threat. I don't know. It sounds pretty good on paper. So
yeah, on paper it sounds all right. Well, or maybe they just go for that sort of the Argentina model. Like, what if Xavi saw that and he's like, yeah, I think I have the personnel where I could set up a similar system.
No, don't do that. That's my advice for that. Messi's not the guy to carry you through a 60-game season anymore. You can't do that. He can carry you through 7 games when there's that passion. But
well, what if, for instance, that's the system that they play against Atletico, against Real? So those 6, 7, 8 fixtures in the league, like maybe against a Real Sociedad as well, like the tougher sort of teams. So those certain number of fixtures, they sort of revert to that system, and they also use that as their system for the Champions League. And then for the rest of the league, they do what they're currently doing.
Yeah, and I guess that's where they stumbled in terms of the big games this season. So yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see if it actually goes through. I think my thoughts on Messi, if he's not going to put everything into winning another Champions League and at a different club. Like, I know this will be a different team, but I want to see him do it at PSG. So there's no way he can build to his legacy going back to Barcelona. So I wouldn't go back. If I was Barcelona, I wouldn't necessarily want him back, even though he might fill a need that they have. But if he does go back and they're flying next season, then we can clip this up and show it to ourselves next season. But at this stage, I'm very iffy on the Messi return.
Well, that's another thing that I remembered. Apparently, the Paris fans were also booing him as he went off the field.
Oh, we'll talk.
All right, we'll get into that later. But like, is there anything else in relation to Barca or Real Madrid or La Liga that you want to touch on before we move on to what happened in Italy?
Well, basically, all right. So this is the part of the pod where I become Russell Westbrook and my usage rate goes through the roof. And you're spotting up in the corner. You're just standing in the corner waiting for the pass that's never going to happen. But I think we're good on El Clasico. In Spain, my Atletico stock is doing quite well. I know they can't win any trophies, but now they can't influence the title, which is a bit disappointing. I would have loved to see Atletico go into the new camp with something really riding on the game for both teams. as it's going at the moment, there might not be anything riding for either team because Atletico are building a handy cushion to fourth place, and they're playing, like I keep saying, they're playing just as well as Barcelona or Real Madrid. They might be on form the best team in Spain at the moment for me. Antoine Griezmann is still unbelievable. I still don't regret putting him in the second team, even though he had an iffy start to the season, not by his own fault, but through that contractual obligation and whatnot. But yeah, Atletico look really good. They win 3-0 against Valencia. It'll be interesting for the rest of Spain. Maybe we'll do that in a later pod, but see if Valencia or Sevilla get relegated, because obviously Sevilla also sacked Sampaoli very recently as well. So they'll be onto their third manager. They're two powerhouses of Spain who are absolutely struggling. And the race for fourth, I think this is probably the least interesting race for fourth or Champions League spots in any of the 5 leagues. It now comes down to Sociedad and Betis. I think it's a bit of a toss-up. These teams struggle to score goals. Sociedad win 2-0 against Elche, who were terrible this season, obviously, and Betis beat Mallorca 1-0 at home. Betis is so stodgy to watch. Sergio Canales is a good player, but the rest is a bit dodgy. I think if I look at those teams on paper, I think Sociedad are better. I think they play in a better way. But I don't know. Betis keep getting these results and they keep sticking around. So I wouldn't be shocked. This is much of a toss-up between these two teams. But like I say, I think this is the least interesting one that's going down to top 4. And I think it is just these two teams now. So I'll still be watching it for that intrigue. But yeah, Sociedad play some good stuff. But yeah. And Italy, you were asking about. So what happened in Italy? Well, I think we need to start by saying, I know we had the 2 derbies. Well, we need to start at the top because Napoli were great again. 4-0. Well, they weren't their best selves, but they cruised to a victory against Torino, who are a stern enough test away as well, and they win, I think, 4-0 in the end. Osimhen scores another goal. Kvaratskhelia gets more assists. I mean, what more can we say? We love them. We'll talk more about them in Champions League context in the coming weeks because they've already won this league. But then the next big piece of news before we even got to the derbies was obviously Milan went away to Udinese. I did flag this as a potentially tricky test. And Milan decided, well, they didn't decide. He wasn't even on the bench, so I assumed there was something wrong. But Theo Hernandez does not start in this game, and they promptly go on and lose 3-1. And Mike Mignon didn't have his best game. I thought for the opening goal, he could have reacted better. But this just goes to the point, Milan are a team who are built on 4 or 5 players. And if they're missing one of those players, the rest of the team can't function properly. And in this game, it's Theo. For the vast majority of their slump, it's been without Mike Mignon. They were terrible against Fiorentina without Rafael. No, it wasn't Fiorentina, was it? Might have been. But without Rafael Leao, they look terrible. Without Sandro Tonali, they have no midfield, even though Tonali hasn't been great this season. So, yeah, Milan are very much based on those players, and if they don't have those players, they can't even win league games in Serie A. I know Udinese are a tough test, but still, 3-1, pretty limp performance. No creation, and that's what Theo Hernandez does so well. So massive incentive now for, I guess, Lazio and Roma, who met first, and Roger Ibanez gets himself sent off. I must admit, I don't even remember the first yellow card in this game, but he got himself a second one for a poor touch, and I think that was around the 30-minute mark, so the rest of the game, I didn't like how the Lazio players, particularly Sergej Milinkovic-Savic, I didn't like how much they celebrated the red card. I get that it's a derby and I get your emotion fueled, but the game is still 0-0 at this point. Like you haven't accomplished anything in the game, so maybe get on with trying to win the game, and they duly do go and win the game. Sakanyi, I thought Sakanyi was pretty poor up until this point, but a lovely finish for the goal. I thought Lazio were the better team even when it was 10v10, but it was always going to be Mourinho's psychological warfare against Sarri's tactical sort of nous. it's hard to say Sarri's tactical sort of, and the tactical thing he did for this game, he drops Ciro Immobile, and he plays with a fluid front three of Saccagni, Felipe Anderson, and Pedro. Pedro's still doing bits at his age. He's still a very good player. But yeah, the pressing was good. The fact that Roma's three centre backs didn't have anything to mark, it was very fluid. I thought was a good tactical move by Sarri. But obviously, we saw as well, especially once the red card happens, Mourinho's shithousery. I know he's not on the bench for this game, but the shithousery he's instilled, particularly in Gianluca Mancini. And honestly, I gotta say, I'm taking my neutral hat off right now. I'm so happy Roma lost this game. I hate when they go to that shithousing. I hate the way they play. I'll admit they have some good performances. And one, I'm also going to flag this, and I'll probably talk about him in the early next week's pod. But Chris Smalling's contract apparently runs out at the end of the season. I think he's been fantastic, so I think it might be time to bring him home to the Premier League, and someone could pick up a very handy free in Chris Smalling from Roma. Liverpool, I was thinking Liverpool, we'd have to change the way we play because he's not that kind of defender in spaces, to be fair to him.
But he's ex-United, so does that affect him?
He is. Maybe Arsenal if he's willing to be a third choice, he's a bigger upgrade on Rob Holding because we'll touch on Arsenal later. But I was not convinced when Saliba was not in the team and Rob Holding was for the weekend. I think he's been. I felt for him. He scores he's involved in Roma's equaliser, which is chalked off by VAR. He's just offside. But yeah, I'm from the non-neutral viewpoint, I'm very happy Roma win this game. They keep another clean sheet. Only 19 goals conceded in the league. They're not a fantastic team, but they're a fantastically solid team. They're going to need to find another gear in the future, and maybe that other gear is Sergej Milinkovic-Savic just playing better because he hasn't been great all season. Maybe it's Ciro Immobile playing better as well, but they're up into second. Well, for now, unless the appeal for the other club, one of the other clubs involved in the other derby in Italy between Inter and Juve. If their appeal's successful, Juve will still be second. But yeah, I think Lazio rightly so is second right now. Somewhat rightly so, because I will say that Juve rolled into the San Siro, and I will say this game wasn't great, so you didn't miss much by not watching this game, to be fair. But Filip Kostic comes up with the winner in the first half. Another instance where I think a goalkeeper could have done better. Onana is way too far over to his near post. Dumfries is a bit slow to get to the shot. And Juve rolled into the San Siro and they looked like they played with the confidence of the second best team in Italy. They were solid defensively. Inter really didn't have much. Lautaro's gone off the boil for Inter, which is disappointing because I think he's easily their best player and he needs to be playing well for Inter to look good, I think. Obviously, Barella's another one. Barella lost his head. Inter kind of lost their head after heads sort of in the first half. Felt aggrieved and, yeah, man, Inter, like I said, Inter are well embroiled in a top four battle and they are in the thick of it. And if Juve get their position back, then there'll only be one spot for... It would be remiss of me not to say that Atalanta won their Friday night game and are now only 3 points off top four after I wrote them off a couple of weeks ago. So after I think last week I said it was 4 teams for 3 positions, it's opened up all of a sudden to 5 teams for maybe 2 positions. So, because I would probably put Juve... they're lurking, they're looking. They're in the corner of the party, they're looking at everyone dancing, and they're like, I might have a bit of that. I might go over onto the dance floor. So this is a huge win for them. Huge loss for Inter. And Inter just... Boy, oh boy. I'm very surprised there's not harsher scrutiny on Simone Inzaghi's future. I don't want this to be the case because I kind of like Simone Inzaghi, but... For me, I think now is the time where there needs to be more scrutiny. But they're still in the Champions League. They still have an easy side of the draw, so they might get into a Champions League final, which is crazy to think. But this team fills me with no confidence. And Juve are at least solid. They're not spectacular, but they're solid, and they got the job done in this game. No Di Maria as well, which I wouldn't have. Who'd have thought at the start of the season I'd say that was a big loss, but this was a huge loss for this game. So Serie A is easily the best top four battle, I think, in all of Europe. It's just crazy. The drama that you get week in, week out. The fact that you don't know what you're going to get from these teams week in, week out. But the fact that all these teams still have fair bits of quality throughout their team, I think makes this very exciting. Touch on another top four race that got very combustible in the Premier League on the weekend, probably to finish it. But yeah, that's Italy.
Well,
And
I was
honestly,
just looking
yeah,
at.
go on.
I don't know if you have anything more to say on in regards to that.
No, not on Italy. Yeah,
Because I was just looking at Juve's fixture list, and out of their remaining league games, they have 4 more games against like direct top 4 rivals. Like, technically, I count a Napoli, even just because they're there, but it's not like they're going to displace Napoli out of the top 4. But like that's going to be a tough game that for them to play. But they have Lazio to play away. They have Atalanta to play away, and they have AC Milan to play at home. So they have so like let's say 3 of those games are against direct rivals for top 4. So
yeah. So it's a gift and a curse.
Yeah,
they're going to be hard games, but they're 6-pointers.
Yeah, exactly. So they could actually like make some ground back in regards to that, and because if they can do that, then I like a couple of weeks ago I didn't write them off, and there's 30.
After the loss
30,
to Roma, we both thought they were done for top 4.
Yeah, but like I think some other results went sort of their way that weekend. That result to Roma didn't help them, but there's 33 points left to play for in the league. So, and they're only 7 points, 7 points behind. So,
and they're still playing with the form of a team who are the second best team in Italy. They can still accumulate points in that way.
Yeah. Oh, also, I just looked at Chris Smalling. He was actually born and raised in London. So, yeah. So but because he played for Manchester United, I don't know if he has any allegiances in that respect to not play for Liverpool or City.
Yeah, that will be an interesting one. It'll be interesting to see if anyone even comes in for it.
Yeah,
especially any big clubs in the Premier League. It might be more of a lower thing. It might be a Newcastle thing, maybe. They love players like that.
That's a good shout.
Anyway, I think we're going to do something about that on a later pod. So we'll go through that early next week. But Juve, and it'll be interesting. The final point on Juve, just before we wrap that up, is it'll be interesting to see if this actually gives the whole squad and particularly Allegri a bit of a conundrum in terms of what to prioritize in the coming weeks. Like, do we still think we can make top 4 in Serie A, or is it all Europa League? Just want to flag one that's going to be fascinating to watch. But in terms of what the most fascinating game or the best game across Europe, that came from the Bundesliga this weekend, because I thought this was just a crazy game between Leverkusen and Bayern, the 2 German representatives in Europe. And I thought it had potential to be a good game because Leverkusen have really good pieces throughout their team. But they're inconsistent, so it only had potential. But in this game, I have to start with the actual goings-on before we get into anything about it. So in this game, Bayern take the lead, undeservedly so. They were battered off the park in the first half. Leverkusen absolutely played them to shreds. I thought Alonso made a really good tactical move. Maybe I haven't been watching Leverkusen enough in recent weeks. Maybe they just play this way now, but he moves Andrich into sort of a sweeper / centre back, the central centre back of the 3, in between, I think, Tapsoba and Kosondo, or I got his name wrong. Apologies if I got his name wrong. But yeah, Andrich is playing as the central centre back, and then they go with a 3-4-3 to sort of combat what Bayern were doing, and to also get joy in the wide areas, I think. Where Bayern can be exposed, and Moussa Diaby was coming up one-on-one against De Ligt all first half. Florian Wirtz was dropping in, playing as a false nine, laying off lovely balls around the corner. He's such a good technical player. And yeah, I thought Leverkusen got the better of the tactical battle. They were creating lots of chances. The midfielders, Palacios we'll talk about him in a minute. So yeah, Bayern go in 1-0 up, undeservedly so. And the second half, two instances, and if I encourage anyone who hasn't seen it to go back and have a look at this. Adli, the striker for Leverkusen, in two instances, he goes into the box, he looks for the penalty, he maybe exaggerates the contact, but the referee in both instances gives him a yellow card for diving. Both instances, the VAR encourages the referee to go over to the monitor. The first one was ridiculous. I can't understand. The first one was Pavard stamps on Adli's his Achilles and the boot comes off. And it's just like, ref, you don't even need to look at this. The boot has come off.
Yeah.
We can see there's contact. So it's like, that's a clear penalty. The second one is our boy Upamecano coming across and making a rash tackle. But yeah, both times Adli gets booked. Both times the ref goes to the VAR, sees contact, gives a penalty, and takes away the booking. So both times he had to go over to Adli with a big smile on his face and just be like, take away the yellow card. And Leverkusen, yeah, Palacios scores both penalties, and Leverkusen win this game, I think rightly so. I think even XG had it as 2-1, and they win the game 2-1. And Bayern... We're Bayern, man. Bayern gonna Bayern this season. I don't know what more we need to say about them, but interesting. Another thing, not to flag, because I think it's more than a flag now, but João Cancelo starts the game as the right wing back. Nagelsmann's not happy with what he sees in the first half, makes a triple substitution. João Cancelo is one of those substituted. So this guy, who was the best left back in the world last season, is on the ropes for a European elite career, because that is... Pep Guardiola's out on you, and now very quickly Julian Nagelsmann is out on you after 2 months. He just doesn't trust you. This is crazy to see from a guy who I think we all regarded as the best left back in the world last season. Mm-hmm. So very interesting to see where he's going to land up, who's going to take him on after the last couple of months, because I think he's been somewhat blacklisted. If two elite managers are going to do that to you in that space of time, boy, oh boy, where's your career going? But that's an interesting one. I think
just want to butt in there.
Yeah, go on, interject when you need to.
On the Upamecano point, just want to suggest a name change there to Upamecano.
Upamecano. That's good. I didn't know where you're going, but that is good.
Yeah, let's call it that from now on, because it really, ever since he left Leipzig, it really seems that way. He's a shadow of the defender that we saw at Leipzig. Similar to Werner, shadow himself.
Yeah. And I'm going to say this, I actually don't like everything I see from Upamecano character-wise, I like. It's just his football. He's a liability, man. So I don't hate the dude. He makes all these mistakes. But the worst thing is Nagelsmann puts him in as the central centre-back. How is Matthias de Ligt not your central centre-back? How is it Upamecano who can make these crucial mistakes as your sweeper? I just think you need better, and Pavard obviously makes a mistake in this game. De Ligt wasn't completely great himself. He didn't cover himself a great. But one player who has been in great form for Bayern, and I'm interested, because we put him on the franchise player list, I think we had him 12th or something, but Alphonso Davies is fantastic for Bayern. And I'm interested, is this a piece of Nagelsmann... Is Nagelsmann actually building a system somewhat around him in the style of a franchise player, where he is the left winger, but he's also the left back because he knows he can get through both those roles? Or does Alphonso Davies just make this system look much better than it actually is? And Nagelsmann needs to see this and play with a more fitting system. But he has been key because it's his physicality, it's his ability to get up and down. It's his ability as a winger, who he's very good as one of them, but it's also his ability to defend, I think, that makes this system somewhat plausible. But even then, I thought Leverkusen outthought Nagelsmann and got to the system. So when you're going forward against Pep Guardiola in the Champions League, you're gonna need to... I don't trust the way they're playing at all. And I think you already need to, Jack, so I'm just on
Well,
your
just on Davies,
Alfonso
like,
Davis.
well,
Yeah,
he might have seen how he plays for Canada because Canada employ him as a a left midfielder in a 3-4-3, and from what I can remember seeing him under Flick before he got injured, he was always bombarding up and down that left hand side. The only so maybe there's that transition there, and considering he now plays or he's trying to play a fluid front three with like Mane, Sane, and Nabry or Coman or whoever instead of like a slightly more static front three with where Lewandowski always occupied the center space. It probably then does allow the freedom for Davies to have that entire left side of the pitch to himself.
yeah, that's what it was. And in this game, there was no Choupo-Moting, and I must say they missed Choupo-Moting, and this is why Xabi Alonso got it right tactically because he was able to put Andrich as the central centre back. Whereas if there was a physical presence like Choupo-Moting up against Andrich, I think he would have had a much tougher time. But
Just
yeah, by
just in regards to
yeah,
that, all right, so team sheets, I think they're released half an hour or an hour before kickoff. Is that right?
yeah, they're pretty close to kickoff.
Yeah. So in regards to tactical setups, how I don't know whether you have any insight into that. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But maybe how would you approach it? Because that would have been something that they worked on. So was it just Xavi saying, "Oh, team sheets come out, Andrich, we've practiced this. This is how we're going to approach it." Since Choupo-Moting isn't going to be playing, or if Choupo-Moting was going to be playing, would he have then said, "Okay, he is playing. We're going to then decide to play like this." So is that something that maybe they look at or what? Because they have half an hour to an hour to actually change tactically their lineup, not change the personnel, but the instructions.
I'm fascinated by this as well, and in this game, I think they might have already known Choupo-Moting wasn't playing because he wasn't even on the bench. I'm pretty sure he didn't come on in this game, so he might be. I don't know. I actually don't know why he wasn't playing, but they might have already known. So Xabi Alonso might have had time to prepare for this. But to your point on the team sheets and being able to change tactically, my inkling would be that you wouldn't want to do that as a manager. You wouldn't want to confuse your players going into a big game where they're in this sort of mindset. I know a lot of managers, just reading autobiography, I think their last real communication with the players is maybe the morning of the game. And then when you get to the ground, they're not influential in what goes on. They're not having like a pre-match team talk. They may be just, for example, I don't know exactly Jurgen Klopp's, how he does it, but you can tell that even during warm-ups, he's not even looking at his own team. He's always looking at the opposition to see what's going on there. So I know Pep because I've read his time at Bayern and his autobiographies. I know that he doesn't really have big communication with the players pre-match. So everything you've done tactically, I guess it's up to the manager just to come up with all the solutions during the week. Whereas they might do this, all right, we're ready for that by doing this. They might do this, we're ready for that doing this. And that's where your homework, your scouting comes into play. You need to have watched a lot of these teams to see what their tendencies are in different situations, in different moments, with different personnel on the pitch. So, but in terms of changing anything tactically because you've seen something on the team sheet, that would be a really tricky position for a manager to be in. Because sometimes you might look at a team sheet, to your point, and be like, yeah, they're playing with this personnel. So it's all up to your preparation at that point. Like, you've got to trust that you've got the players ready enough that they can adapt and react to that. And that's why I think teams like that who know what their strengths are, but they're also cognizant of how to react to what the opposition can do, i.e. Real Madrid, i.e. Napoli this season. When teams are like that and they're not stuck in, this is what we do and this is what we're going to do all the time, when teams can actually react to opposition, I just think it makes them much better teams. And to that point, I'll talk about another Bayern team, which is one of my favourite Bayern teams of all time, or Bayern eras of all time. which is the Pep era of Bayern. I thought that was one of the best teams I've ever seen play, and they were never rewarded with a Champions League. But I honestly thought that team was better than Barcelona for me, and it was for that fact that they could react and adapt, and they were supremely intelligent in every sense of the game. They were physical as well, and they could beat you anyway. But their supreme intelligence was the thing that always got me with that team. So yeah, it's up to trying to create a team that can do that really as a manager, and that's not anything you do half an hour before kickoff. That's everything you do in the week leading up.
Yeah, and this sort of threw me back to remember when Mourinho like predicted the lineups.
Yeah.
Like, well, was it for a Champions League between Chelsea and was it Barca? Yeah, it was Barca, wasn't it? Yeah, and he actually predicted the lineups like ahead of time, like player for player.
That was a great Mourinho moment. That was peak Mourinho.
That was peak. Yeah, that was peak
in
Mourinho.
So
Actually,
good.
what do you reckon peak Mourinho is? Because he never won a Champions League with Chelsea, but But he won one. He won the treble with Inter.
It's those 2 seasons at Chelsea for me. Those first 2 seasons, losing one game in the first season and 95 points, and then second season 91 points or something, and the defensive record I think was 37 goals conceded over those 2 seasons, which is insane. Less than 20 each season, which is just crazy. Well, I think the first season was 15. They conceded 15 goals all season.
Yeah, but
that was peak for me. I know no Champions League, and I know Liverpool robbed them of that 04-05 one.
Was that ghost goal?
Yeah, the ghost goal.
I wonder,
sucked it in.
Is there a way to retroactively check that with VAR?
That would be interesting, wouldn't it? Maybe because they don't have the cameras set up that you need for Hawkeye, so you can't get a definitive answer. But
I think there might be ways to do it based on like the speed of the ball and the trajectory of the ball. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe there is some ways to do it. But yeah, that'd be interesting if they can retroactively check that.
I'm alright with the mystery, man. All I know is what happened. We got that trophy with big ears. Yeah, I guess just to finish on this game, because it was the most interesting game, and it is very interesting for going forward in terms of the Champions League. Yeah, obviously, Choupo-Moting being in this team, we did get to see a Mane-led front line, honestly. And it's not all his fault, but remember at the start of the season, we're like, oh, Liverpool lost out so badly on the Mane deal. Like,
yeah, they were flying.
And he's playing better than Salah, and I flagged that might be a competition between the two. Honestly, you'd probably give it to Salah, and it's not Mane's fault because he's been injured. But even in this game, when he does play, he was anonymous. I didn't see him at all. So if this is the way forward for Bayern, if it's the Mane-led front line instead of the Choupo-Moting-led front line, man, they better get a move on with making it look better than this, because they're getting a very stern test from Manchester City very soon. And I was very happy for Leverkusen because I've liked the football they've played for the most part under Alonso, but I thought that they've had a very soft underbelly. And I actually had that as a note after they conceded that first goal, that Leverkusen look good, but they're still soft. But they were able to show some resilience in this game, get back into it and win it, and throw the Bundesliga title race back once again into disarray, because Dortmund, who I've been very critical of this season, are now top of the league. And no, this is actually a surprise. I'm gonna heap praise on Dortmund because they looked fantastic in their, I think it was 6-1 win against Köln at home. And we've seen Köln go to the Allianz Arena and pick up a point against Bayern. So if we go by your picking up points against certain opposition sort of theory, Dortmund have got +2 on Bayern just there by winning their home game against Köln. And they did it very convincingly, and they looked very good. And honestly, the run of form they're in at the moment, I can't really begrudge them being top of the Bundesliga, even though I have all season. I think Edin Terzic, for his move to put Rafael Guerreiro in central midfield, has been a masterstroke. He's always been a player with central midfielder tendencies, I think it's good to see him in there and bolstering up that midfield, which I think's been a bit iffy for Dortmund all season. Dahoud starts this game over Emre Can, and he looked like the player I think Dortmund thought they were signing a couple of seasons ago because he played to his ceiling. He looked really good, and if he plays to that level, he is a better option than Emre Can for me, but he doesn't always play to that level. He's a bit flaky at times, and I thought the only period where Dortmund sort of struggled in this game, he got a bit passive. But it's not a big criticism. They won the game 6-1, so who really cares? Daniel Marlin had a really good game at right mid. Jude Bellingham was great again, but the big takeaway for Dortmund was Jude Bellingham was great, but everyone sort of played to his level, so he was just a good player in a good team in this game. And if Dortmund look like this going forward, and they have a very big game after the international break against Bayern Munich, so if they can look anywhere near like this for that game, they'll fancy their chances because they looked very good in this game. And one thing to flag, I've been critical of Manchester City somewhat handing Arsenal the title this season with the Zinchenko, to a lesser extent Jesus, but the Zinchenko in particular. Why, oh why? Oh, another point on Bayern. I may be being a little. This is just a side note from before, but I may be being a little critical on Nagelsmann because you've also got to think they lost Lucas Hernandez at the World Cup, and if they had Lucas Hernandez, he is the most logical choice to slot in as that left centre back behind Alphonso Davies and be more adept at defending the wide areas than Matthias de Ligt. So maybe that's a little, but you've also got to adapt to what you have. So maybe I'm not being harsh, but anyway, the Dortmund point. What was I saying about Dortmund?
Bayern handing them the title, similar to
Oh
City.
yeah. I can't understand why they let Niklas Süle go on a free at the end of last season. He has easily been Dortmund's best defender. I know this isn't saying much given the nature of the Bundesliga, but he's maybe the best defender in the Bundesliga this season. I think he's criminally underrated. I think he has been for a few years. I know he had his injury concerns at Bayern, but he's a good ball player. He's not that slow, given what you actually, when you look at him, you think this guy's a lumbering oaf, but he's actually very good on the ball. He's actually quite quick. He's physical. He can play right back as well. So I still don't understand why they let him go for a free. And if they lose this title, in main as a main piece, and Nicolas Süle as a main piece of Dortmund winning it, then they'll be kicking themselves. It is a 2-horse race in Germany because Leipzig lose 1-0 away at Bochum, and they're just a wretched watch at the moment. No Christopher Nkunku again, and they're just terrible to watch. So not much to say there. Eintracht might be out of the top 4 race because they battered Union Berlin for the first half. Randall Koulibaly was fantastic until he needed to put the ball in the back of the net. And then in the second half, Union get a second wind and they win the game 2-0. Surprise, surprise, they score the first goal from a set piece because that's what they do. But as dire as Union's football is at times, I must say I'm quite happy for their story because they're, like I keep saying, they're not a team who's come out of nowhere. They've steadily been progressing since the team's been in the Bundesliga. The last 2 seasons, they finished 7th and 5th. And if they are to get into top 4, I know the title might be out of their grasp now. And for a long time, we're talking about a Leicester City story. Probably not going to be the case. But if they finish in the top 4 and get Champions League football, what a great achievement for this club who, like I say, have been building towards this. They're not a team who just come out of nowhere and they're going to finish top 4 there. They've been building to something. So if they do get it, and I would love to see them get in, probably ahead of even Leipzig at this stage. I'd probably rather see Eintracht get in over Leipzig as well, but I don't think that will be the case. Freiburg, I don't quite watch enough of them, and I think we're revoking that Fraudberg term. But, they're still right in the mix. This is a good top 4 battle. I don't think it's quite as interesting because there's not as much quality as you get in Serie A and even in the Premier League for that top 4 race, but interesting in its own right. And I think taking off the neutral hat, I do want Union to do it just as the cherry on top, because I don't know if they can ever win the league, but if they could get into Champions League, that would be maybe the apex this club will ever ever get. So I want it for them. I want it for their fans. I want it for their progression. That would just be a fantastic story. I think that's it from the Bundesliga. Just a quick.
You're gonna buy a Berlin shirt.
No, I won't quite go that far. If they play better football, I might buy a Berlin shirt, but they're a little bit tedious to watch at times. So I'm not going to go that far. But and another it's a top 3 race in France. But I did get across most of these games. I think Lens were able to win. I think 4-0 at home, 3-0 at home. Good win for them. They were up into second before Marseille played later in the week. I personally hope they hold on. They've been missing Facundo Medina for recent weeks, but I've liked how they've adapted to play a 4-3-3 in recent weeks as well, adapted to their personnel. Now, they did change it back to a 3-4-3 in this game, and ultimately that was what opened up the game for them. But even being able to show an ability to be so adaptable within games, I think is a strong suit of theirs, and they are, I believe, the best defense in Ligue on record. So I always love it. I'm a sucker for a team with a good defensive record, and they show why they have that at the moment. Monaco also won at Ajaccio. The most interesting thing from that game was the landscape. With those small stadiums where you could just see over the stadium and you can see all the mountains and stuff in the back, and it's just like, oh, that's really nice. But the game itself was fine.
Yeah,
Monaco,
which is that stadium that's like built into a mountain?
Braga,
yeah.
in Portugal. That's a beauty. I love that stadium. But yeah, Monaco is still pushing. I don't know if they'll get there because I think Lens and Marseille might be too strong. Maybe Lens will fall off. We don't know. Monaco have some good players. I think teams around Europe should be maybe looking at. Ben Yedder continues to be a really good player. He's maybe a bit old for teams to be looking at, but players like Ben Seguir, Vanderson, these type of players, maybe even Diasu, the defender. There's some good players in Monaco. They'll push all the way. But finally, another team who maybe have thrust themselves into a Champions League contention, Rennes. I did say it was against your boy Lover Amai. He didn't play in this game. And it didn't matter because PSG are shambolic. They are so... Wow. Where to start with PSG? The body language is terrible. There's no unity in this team. Galtier sits on the bench sort of as a man resigned to his fate. We had the instance a couple of weeks ago with the sporting director coming all the way down from the stands to inject something. Boy, oh boy, the fans, as you say, booing Messi off the pitch. The 2 times they conceded in this game. And Rennes were the better team. Make no mistake about it. It looked like a game where PSG was where Rennes scored the goal in the first half. They're maybe not playing at their best, but PSG looks like the weaker team who were trying to push and who looked like the underdog. And then second half, given that they're at home, they push a little bit more. And then when the game fizzles out, Rennes just run all over PSG and they have more chances to make it more embarrassing at the end of the game. And that's kind of what big teams do to little teams. So this was role reversal. Maybe it wasn't role reversal. I believe the gap is 10 at the top of Ligue 1. And I also didn't mention Marseille inflicting the first defeat on Will the Thrill Still. And just quietly, Alexis Sanchez was freaking awesome in this game. Scores an unbelievable free kick. I think it either gets or is a big part of the second goal. I don't know if you could quickly look up, how old is Alexis Sanchez? I forgot to look this up after the game, but I'd say he's only like 30, 31. He might be a bit older, though. He might be like 33 by now.
I'll have a gaze.
But he looks fit again. He looks not quite peak Alexis Sanchez. He was awesome back in the day, but he looks really, really good.
He's 34.
Yeah, he's a little bit older, man.
So
if he was like 32, I'd say maybe a big club might take a chance on him again. But anyway, it's good for
Balogun also got a goal in that game.
He did, but he missed a few chances at the end there. He looks maybe a bit better, Eddie Nketiah. Maybe not, because this is just Ligue 1. But yeah, he's scoring, which is great for him and great
Isn't
for
he like the
Arsenal and
leading
great for
goal
his.
scorer or one of the leading
Yeah,
goal
he is
scorers?
leading. I think he is the leading goal scorer in the
Yeah.
league. So, but Marseille keep the pressure up. I believe it's only 7 points between them and PSG. And if this PSG performance is anything to go, and it might not be anything to go by because, like I've said, since the World Cup, any test that PSG have had to face, and Rennes were a test, they've duly been dispatched. They've lost every time, pretty much. I think they lost to Lens. Oh, they beat Marseille in the league game, but they
Mm.
also lost the Coupe de France game against Marseille. That's the only big game PSG have managed to win since we've been back from the World Cup break. So it might not be an indicator of what's to come for PSG because they'll be playing weaker teams every week. But my God, they were terrible. They were awful in this game, and the lack of unity, the lack of unity within the players, the lack of unity from the coach to the players, and now the fans to the players is worrying. So look, if they slip up and play half decent teams again and lose those games, we might have a bit of a title race because they are sleepwalking into one, PSG, and yeah, very very poor, very worrying. And I guess to wrap up, we'll go back to Britain, to England, and there was only a few Premier League games, but obviously big ones for top four and for the title. I guess given that this was the other game that you watched, we could start on the Arsenal game. But I must say, I don't know. I don't know if you know how bad is the Saliba injury. How long is he
I
expected
haven't
out
I
for?
haven't checked that, but it's a good thing that there's an international break.
It's a very good thing because I was. Look, they win the game 4-1 and they look scintillating going forward, and they're
Mm.
such a great footballing side. But when the game was still in the balance early on, I didn't like holding back there instead of Saliba. I did not like the look of that.
Yeah, you know what I'll say on Holding though, like he's a squad player, and
Yeah. What
you're
what choice centre back is he? Sorry to cut you off. Like
well,
what choice
he's
ideally do you want him?
well, he's the first. Okay, here's the problem. Tomiyasu's injured as well, and that one looks like it's a season-ending injury. Like it looks like it's pretty serious. So if Tomiyasu was fit, I imagine Ben White would have been moved to centre back, right centre back, and Tomiyasu would have played right back, or vice versa. Tomiyasu would have played right centre back because he's also capable of playing centre back. So he's then first choice after if there's any injuries to Saliba or Gabriel. I imagine maybe not to Gabriel because we bought Kivior and he's a left-sided and left-footed centre back. But here's the thing though, he's a squad player. You can't hang your hat on him as your first choice centre back if you want to win the league. But for him to come in and play like 5 league games, and that's good enough. And for him to put in the performance, I'd say he put in a pretty decent shift against Crystal Palace overall. Obviously, it became easier once Arsenal actually scored. But I don't think he really put a foot wrong, to be honest. And for a player that's barely played any actual minutes, he didn't play too bad. But again, I reiterate, you can't hang your hat on him to win the league, and you can't hang your hat on him for the run in of the next, I don't know, what is it, 10 games or 12 games? What is it?
Yeah, I think in terms of choice, he needs to be no better than a fourth choice, and right now he's the third choice, which is worrying. But I also thought in this game, do you think it's an option to put Gabriel where Saliba plays? Because it's so important. I know it's the right-sided centre-back technically, but when they play with the ball, he's almost like the sweeper, Saliba is. He's the guy who's the cover for everything. And given that Gabriel is your best defender now, without Saliba there, we can argue about whether he was when Saliba was there anyway. But the fact that I know he probably likes the fact that Gabriel's left-footed and can play out from the back, but like you say, you've got Kivior. You've even got Kieran Tierney, if you want to. Like, I know he's more of a left centre back rather than an actual one of the two. I get that, but he can still play the ball with the left foot if you're worried about the possessional, the way it looks possessionally in terms of putting Gabriel into the middle. But I just think if it has to be that Saliba's out, I think Gabriel needs to step up. And it's not his choice because Arteta doesn't put him there. But maybe the fact that Arteta doesn't put him there is a little bit telling, that he doesn't trust him as the sweeper, but he's got to be better than Rob Holding, surely. So, I don't know. Maybe that's an interesting one that they can look at if Saliba is out for a while. But as an Arsenal, as someone who wants Arsenal to win the title, if it's between them and City, I definitely am hoping that Saliba is not out for any prolonged period of time.
Yeah, see, here's the thing with that, though. And, like, this sort of goes back to what I heard Dalic say at the World Cup. I can't remember if it was against Belgium or Japan, where Sosa, he was our first choice left back. He was out because there was a bit of a bug going throughout the camp. And then they asked him, "Oh, are you going to move Guardiola to left back and then like have Vida and Lovren as your two centre backs?" And his response was pretty much like, "I don't want to." And like we had Barisic as well, who's a decent left back, but his response was basically like, "I don't want to fix one position by then having to go and fix another position. So then you're actually fixing two positions, even though there's only one originally to fix. So by moving Gabriel to right centre back, you then need to fix the left centre back, and Kiwior is new, so we don't know, and he hasn't actually. I think he's only played like 10 Premier League minutes, and that was who was that against? He was brought on against someone. I think he was brought on against Crystal Palace, was it? I don't know, or maybe the game before that he was brought on for like the last 10-15 minutes. So like he doesn't know the Premier League, so I'd say it's probably more riskier doing that move of Gabriel to right centre back and then Kiwior to left centre back than holding as a straight swap for Saliba. But you did mention Tierney, like you can bring him in if you revert to a 3 at the back, you can play him. But then that just ruins the whole system and formation as well. Going to like a 3-4-3. I'd say just do the straight swap, holding for Saliba, and then you just tell Ben White to cover a little bit more, or be a little bit more aware that you have to cover, and Saliba a little bit more aware that you have to cover, and Partey as well. So like they just have to have maybe a 5% extra defensive responsibility.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I don't know. Maybe this is a moot point because
maybe it's nothing.
It's 2 weeks, and Saliba might be fit by that time.
Well, all right. You know what? We'll move on to the next talking point of the Premier League.
The only other one?
The only other one, and that's pretty much Conte calling out, not his team, pretty much calling out Tottenham as a club.
He called out everyone. He called
out everyone, and I didn't watch the whole thing in full. I saw clips of it, but yeah, give us your thoughts. I'm going to check the Saliba injury while you do that.
This was, I guess this was Pompeii. Tottenham were Pompeii, and Conte was Mount Vesuvius, and he was bubbling up, and he finally exploded, and Pompeii got buried under the ash and under the explosion because, Conte. I think we could all see this coming, and not to this extent. And this is a great moment in terms of Premier League press conferences in recent history. But my goodness, man, the guys. I really, I don't know if I'll say I like, but I respect Antonio Conte as a manager, so I'm torn. Because I think he is Tottenham's best option. I think he was when they got him. I actually think Tottenham's direction in terms of Pochettino getting them as close as he did, now we can quibble about whether they should have invested more money after Poch made that Champions League final. But I think their direction in terms of, maybe it came a bit late, but how are you going to sack Poch after he gets you to a Champions League final? But I think their idea of getting these proven winning managers in to try and take them over the hump, it's not a bad idea. It kind of goes against what Conte's saying in his whole rant, because he's talking about they never want to play for anything. Well, I would suggest the reason they brought you in, big fella, was because they wanted to play for things, and your football and your team just hasn't looked like it can play for big things. I mean, that second leg against Milan was absolutely dire. Terrible, considering you just needed one goal to get yourselves back into the tie. So the fact that he just deflects all blame away from himself, I'm not saying he's wrong in terms of saying some of the things he said. I definitely don't think the players are good enough. I'd be interested to know the players in some positions, I must say, are not good enough. But I'd be interested to see what kind of influence he has on the transfer policy, or who they get in, because I would suggest Pedro Porro is a signing for him. Kulusevski was probably a signing for him, but he was okay at least for a long time. Well, definitely Pedro Porro. Pedro Porro is going to be an interesting one because he is an out-and-out wing-back, so that'll be a fascinating one in itself. But yeah, I think we could all see what he thought, and he finally just verbalized it for us all. And yeah, like I said, I respect Conte, so I take away a few points, but ultimately I can't get on board with how he's acted pretty much his whole time at Tottenham in terms of always deflecting blame. He never looks within himself. He never looks in the mirror and thinks, am I doing something wrong? Or at least he doesn't portray that in his press conferences. And look, honestly, if I were to say, are you doing something wrong, Antonio Conte? Yeah, you are. Your football is dire, and you've shown no appetite to ever change it away from that. So he needs to take as much blame as anyone else in this situation. So I'm not impressed by his deflecting tactics, not at all. But yeah, Volcano Mount Conte finally buries Tottenham.
Yeah, you know what? Did he board a plane straight after the game to Italy as well? So pretty much buries the team and the club and then pisses off to Italy. Like absolutely. And apparently, I saw a photo. Like he flew like Ryanair, like just economy class as well. Like someone that was sitting next to him just took a photo, which is actually pretty cool. Like he's not like spending thousands of pounds on like a ticket just to travel like 2 hours or whatever. Also on your point in regards to Tottenham, Conte always deflecting. I think it's to save his reputation because he probably sees this is fucked. Like this team, I can't get anything out of them. I can't. It's weird to say he can't get any signings because wasn't everyone saying Tottenham won the transfer window? Because they signed like
doesn't line
5
up what
players.
He's saying. It doesn't line up, man.
And he was there, so he was advising, I want this player, no, I don't want this player. Like Perisic, that's his player. Like that is 100% his player. That he brought him over from Inter. And it's hard to then say like that it's not his fault, like part of it. But obviously his tactics are, I'm going to deflect, I'm going to blame the club, I'm going to blame the players. I'm not the problem, and that way he can, when he fails eventually, or with Tottenham, and I'm saying when, not if, because it's looking like when rather than if, he pretty much can pick up any big job that he wants.
Okay, let's talk about this because this is interesting now. Is this Antonio Conte's Manchester? Is Tottenham Hotspur to Antonio Conte what Manchester United was to Jose Mourinho? And what I mean by that was this the cracking of one of the best managers of the recent times? And was this the moment where, for me, they transitioned into, you're not an elite manager anymore? Because I would say Manchester United was where everyone cottoned on to Mourinho. It's like, hey, this guy isn't quite at the top anymore. And I dare say, if I was a club looking to employ a new manager, I would look at Antonio Conte and his tactics of deflecting and say, you know what? This might signal that you're not that top manager anymore, because a top manager will look inside first. And then they'll say, look, I did some things wrong. I need to fix this. And you'd see it in the football in week to week. It's like he's trying to fix things. We don't see that at all. So if a manager gets to a point where they think they're so big that they can't take on any sort of learning, I would be very worried as a club to work with that manager. I would want to work with a manager who, hey, like even, and here's the big thing about the rant. The rant said, the rant was like, tell Tottenham to sack me without saying sack me. That was what the rant was. It was just like, please get me out of this position right now. And he wants his redundancy package, and he doesn't deserve his redundancy package if that's how he's going to go about it. I think Tottenham should be able to sack him without giving him a redundancy, to be quite honest. But that's neither here nor there. But yeah, if I was a big club, I'd want to have seen Conte have some more, not remorse, but some more introspection, and then I'd probably want him to leave this post and not get paid out, because that would show a bit of, not growth, but that would show maturity on his side. He knows that this marriage isn't going to work, and he was big enough to leave it without trying to force some sort of compensation package. And then I'd want him to have a few months where, because we know it's been a really tough year for him, personally, or 12 months or whatever it is, I'd want him to go away and decide whether he wants to be a top level manager again. And then if he does, I'd want him to go away. And a lot of managers, I think I've said this before, you often see a lot of managers, I think, progress in their ideas in their time away from the game. I think Guardiola from his time from Barca to Bayern did it. Klopp from his time from Dortmund to Liverpool did it. They have a few months off, they recharge, they get a greater perspective on football, they get to see where the trends are, what's happening, where it is moving forward. So if I was a big club, I'd want all of those things to happen, and we've seen none of it. It looks like he's going to continue the job. Or if he doesn't, it looks like he'll get a compensation package. He's deflected all the time. So, yeah, my big point is I'd be very worried to work with Antonio. And where does he go? What other big clubs has he not managed at?
Well, two things. Like, contrast that, for instance, with Klopp, who's also struggling this season. And from all the interviews that I saw with him, he was always saying I or we. He was never saying they. So I never really saw him deflect, in all honesty. He was always,
except for excuses, which have become legendary.
But he was always pretty much, like I said, he was pretty much always saying we as a team or I need to work on things, rather than they need to work on things. The club needs to fix things. So he never really deflected. He was always trying to protect his players, at least in the public eye. And yeah, to your point, where does he go? Does he go maybe back to Inter? But did he have a falling out with Inter, or did he just leave voluntarily because there was like a change of ownership or something, or the funds weren't coming in? But
yeah, I don't know. Inter makes sense, but it doesn't make sense because I don't know what direction Inter are going themselves as well. Their squad is weirdly built this season. And they've had to sell on Skriniar, or not sell him on, but let him leave to PSG in the summer. And I guess we'll touch on Inter in the next pod because we've got that sort of thing that we want to do. But yeah, man, I like it. You'd have to say it's Italy, but he's already managed at two of the biggest clubs in Italy, and that sort of hamstrings him. Like, will he take an AC Milan job? I don't know. That would be interesting, actually, but the Inter fans will hate him. He'll be hated in the city of Milan because and also the AC fans already probably hate him, because I remember when I was talking to my nonna when Allegri first got into Juve in the early 2010s. Sorry. And obviously Allegri had the past with AC Milan, and my nonna was very adamant that he didn't want Allegri in charge of Juve because of that past with AC Milan. So that's how the Italians work. That's how the fan bases work. So if he was to go to AC, he'd have all of Milan hating him now. But if he could keep hold of all of those players at AC, that would be a very interesting project. One that probably lends itself to his 5-3-2/3-4-3, whatever he chooses to play. And yeah, like I say, world-class players there. But is he still a world-class manager? I don't know. I need to see something.
Yeah, so far we aren't seeing it, but whether that's because he won the title in Italy 2 years ago.
And he got Tottenham to finish top 4 last season as well.
Whereas, but except I'd put more blame on Arsenal there because they had it in their hands, so it was more them handing it to them rather than Tottenham being fantastic. But then, like for instance, look at Mourinho. When's the last time he won a league title?
He won the Conference League last season and got it tattooed on his.
I said league title.
I know.
When's the last time he won? Hang on, Conte to PSG. What do you think of that? But I don't think he'd get a ring out of those players.
Oh yeah, no. Look at if I'm worried about where Inter are going, I'm shitting myself about where PSG are going. Where the hell is that club going? But I think their ownership is distracted about multi-club ownership policies and stuff, and trying to lobby with UEFA and FIFA. So, man, I don't know what's happening with PSG. PSG, who knows if they can't get their multi-club ownership and the owners decide I'd rather invest in Manchester United or whatever. Then where are PSG left at the end of all of that?
Yeah, what happens there?
Exactly. That's one I can't even conceptualize.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's one to watch.
You know what though? I don't know if this may be a topic for another day, but like, what if the Qatari owners have to sell PSG and then to buy Man United, and then they buy Man United, but then if they bring the same sort of policies to United, does United sort of become eventually? Does it sort of become like a PSG, where it just becomes like a rotten core? Like, is that who's to blame there? Is it the ownership model? Is it what do you think?
It's a tough one to say.
What do you speculate?
One thing that I might.
And then a question about Tottenham before we want to wrap things up.
Yeah, one thing I might look to in the case of Manchester United, if that was their tactic going forward, is that historically they're just a bigger club than PSG ever have been in their short 50-year history. So I know it's not a logical thing to look at, but I think it makes more sense for a club of Manchester United's stature to be able to deal with the super egos that you bring in terms of bringing these huge players in. Whereas PSG, because that club never really had anything behind it, if you're a super ego player and a super big player going to PSG, you know that you're going there to run the show. Whereas at Manchester United, if the environment's right, and often in the recent past it hasn't been the right environment at Manchester United, but if it is right, it's sort of the done thing. It's superstars go to Manchester United, whereas 15 years ago, superstars never went to PSG. Like, obviously Ronaldinho did, but he wasn't a
superstar.
Yeah, he wasn't quite a superstar
not
just
then.
Yet. He was very close, but not quite there. So yeah, I think just it lines up more traditionally with what you'd see, and maybe that, I don't know, maybe I'm just being sort of superstitious or illogical in thinking that. But if you go to Manchester United as a superstar player, that club has to be more well equipped with not letting your ego outshine the club, because the club is so massive. Whereas PSG were not massive until they started getting all these big players, and I guess they've marketed themselves well. They're somewhat massive, but in terms of football, they're still not quite there yet.
Yeah, it's sort of like a reverse transfer policy not transfer. It's a reverse foundation to the two clubs where, with Manchester United, it's the club that makes the player a superstar and makes the player well known. Whereas at PSG, it's the player that makes the club well known. Because all these big signings is what's made PSG become, the most talked about. One of the most talked about clubs and one of the biggest clubs in Europe, not necessarily their success. They won league titles, but they've also dropped league titles. Like, didn't they lose to, like, originally years ago, they like Montpellier won the league title. Monaco's won the league title. Is it?
And Lille.
Lille have won the league title as well. So, yeah, like they haven't dominated the league titles either. But like even then, like they've underachieved in Europe. Whereas here, like United, at least they have that history and a decent foundation as well, a much better foundation at least than PSG. And look, to wrap things up, we were talking about where Conte would go. What about who will come to Tottenham? Two managers that are free are Poch to come back, and Tuchel as well is one that could be talked about as an option. I'm not sure who else is, because obviously Tottenham want to go for a big established manager. I'm not sure who else is necessarily out there.
Man, this is fascinating. I think Tottenham need to have a frank discussion with Son and Kane, particularly Kane. If Kane says when they sit down, I'm looking to leave in the summer, then that I think changes the kind of manager you go for. You wouldn't go for a Thomas Tuchel if you're not going to have Harry Kane there. I think you'd go for a more building manager. They might do the thing where they go with the hot name and maybe Brighton get pillaged for Roberto De Zerbi or something like that. But yeah, you'd go with more building manager if that was the case. But if Harry Kane says I'm keen to stay, then you have to look at getting good managers around him. And I guess, to be fair to Tottenham, I guess that's what they thought they were doing when they got Mourinho and Conte in, and it just hasn't quite panned out that way. Yeah, I think it all rests on Harry Kane, what kind of manager you go for. And I can't throw out all the names, like Tuchel and Poch are obviously interesting choices. Poch has been out of work for a while, and his PSG time was not very good. Tuchel is a very good manager. He's a touch overrated at times for me, but he is a very good manager. So yeah, if you've got Harry Kane still there, probably Tuchel is the most logical choice, I'd say, if you can get him.
Is there anyone from Germany, for instance, that could probably come in, or Italy? Because from Spain, I'm not sure who could necessarily come in.
I don't think so. I think the Italian managers are pretty happy where they are. I don't think they'd want to go over to Tottenham, especially because you'd think that they'd be pretty acutely aware of Conte's situation there. So they would have heard the things Conte's saying and maybe be inclined to believe their countrymen and think Tottenham's a shit show. Germany, not really. No, not really. Terzic is too young at Dortmund.
I'm sort of thinking Alonso, but he's just come in at Bayer Leverkusen.
Yeah,
and
honestly, if I was Xabi Alonso, I'd be more excited to keep working at Leverkusen, unless we got pillaged in the summer. Yeah, I'd be more, because it's a little bit away from the spotlight. I could keep building, but I have enough talent that I can actually do something, as we saw in the game against Bayern. So yeah, I'd be more keen to stay there if I was Xabi.
Patrick Vieira. Well, if he wants to, like,
stop it.
Hang on. If he wants to come in as like an inside
Arsenal legend,
if he wants to, if he wants to come in as like an inside man to destroy them even further, perfect.
That's good. I think when we start getting into that conversation, that's a good place to wrap it up.
It's a good place to wrap it up. R.I.P.
Should we let the listeners know what the idea is for the next pod, given that it's international, or should we keep it as a surprise?
You know what? Tell them, because like, you know how you're like, for TV shows, you're always like, in the next episode. So,
yeah, exactly. And if you stayed with us to an hour 45, you kind of earned it. So, yeah. For the next one, Nev and I would like to get a jump on the transfer market speculation, given that it's international weekend. We're thinking of going around the big clubs in Europe, and just recommending one signing for each of those clubs. So that'll give us a chance.
Hang on, I want to interject here. Let's go 2 signings. So like the main signing. And then, for instance, and then a backup to that signing. So let's say your team needs a defender, and if you can't get that defender that you want, this is the backup defender. So it's not like, we want a defender, but then if we can't get the defender, we're going to get a midfielder. So do you want to do that?
Well, you know what we'll do? Because we'll go through the clubs, like, we'll probably have to, at least in our minds, make up some sort of short list.
Yeah.
Because obviously you have to think, what position do I want? So what we'll do, we'll just go through our logic behind each club, because that will give us an opportunity to sort of go through each club and what we think of them or what we think their deficiencies are, and then come up with the best signing. So we'll have like a little segment and a little list, but ultimately we'll have to pick. I don't mind if it's one, or I don't mind if it's two or one. So I don't mind the idea of a backup.
Maximum.
Max.
Yeah, let's have a backup at least. So
you can't buy everyone. I was thinking maybe we could do it.
But like,
I was thinking maybe we could do it with a budget, but then you have to look up players' prices.
Yeah, no, but to my point, where it's a backup for that position, so it's like it's similar to, for instance, like what Arsenal did with Trossard. Like we didn't get Mudryk, so we signed Trossard. We didn't get Caicedo. Well. Yeah, we didn't get Caicedo, so we picked Jorginho. So it's similar to that. Yeah. So we'll do it. We'll do it that. I reckon we do it that way. That's that way we give the listeners an extra name drop at least.
Yeah, and that will be early next week, because then we'll be able to talk a little bit about some juicy international fixtures. Yeah,
and we're doing it pretty much for the top like 4 or 6 teams in each league, right?
Just the big ones. Like there's been, obviously, I think if you've listened, you can tell which teams I've been watching most of the season. So I'll do it for all those clubs, and you do it for the ones you feel you have enough knowledge for as well.
Yeah.
And then, so obviously the really big clubs will be there.
Obviously. All right, cool. Well, that's the plan for next week. Caleb, it's been a pleasure as always, catching up and chatting, even if it is over the internet. But it is what it is. Maybe one day we'll have a live podcast when you visit me or when I revisit Australia. But to all our listeners, thanks for sticking around for the last hour and 46 minutes, and make sure you like, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And thanks for coming, and bye for now.